Hi, I'm Robbie Lane, and we're turning back the hands of time, back to when Canadian rock and roll was still brand new.
During the early 1960s, teens in towns and cities across Canada were forming rock bands and performing while still in high school. One of those teens was Toronto's Robbie Lane.
In my early teens, probably 13, was when I first joined a band, but as a drummer. And I was really a bad drummer. So they didn't really care if they had a vocalist at the time, but I convinced them that they needed this. And I got into sort of a neighborhood band, which grew into more of a Toronto scene band as the years went on. And I think as the years went on and things started happening, recording-wise, that's when I decided I think I'll devote full-time to music.
I can hear your name ringing, what down the line. I can hear your name ringing, on down the line.
Although he's been performing using the name for almost half a century, Robbie Lane is not the name on his birth certificate.
My real name is Robin Curry, and we didn't think Robbie Curry sounded really good as a stage name, so we had a brainstorming session with the band. One of the members of the band said, Lane is a good name. We think Robbie Lane sounds good. So I said, okay, that's what it'll be. And I went home, and my mother, during dinner, I was telling her about the events of the day and the rehearsal and what we had done. And I said, and I've changed my name to, my last name to Lane. And she said, why did you choose that name? And I said, well, it just Gene suggested it, our bass player, and we just thought it sounded good. And she said, well, my birth parents were named Lane, and they both passed away just after I was born, and she was adopted by someone else. So I had chosen her real name without knowing it.
In the mid-60s, Robbie and his band signed on with legendary musician Ronnie Hawkins, who came to Canada from his native Arkansas in the late 1950s and quickly became the king of the Toronto music scene. Robbie Lane and the Disciples eventually replaced Ronnie's original backup musicians, the Hawks, who left to become the band. Robbie remembers that Ronnie was a strict boss, but says that they learned a lot.
Rehearsing was the key. He would make us stay every night after 1 o'clock until maybe 4:30 in the morning rehearsing his material. He never stayed. He'd take off to Top's restaurant and eat and then go home. But we were there to stay. Now, it was kind of better that he wasn't there because we ended up rehearsing a lot of stuff on our own that we wanted to learn. But it was a good training session for us.
Robbie and the Disciples worked with Ronnie Hawkins for a year and a half, then left to continue on their own. As the group's reputation grew, television came calling.
Hi, and I'm your go-go host, Mike Darrow, and right now all systems are go-go on a Go-Go 66, starring Robbie Lane and the Disciples.
I had been doing a TV show called Music Hop as a guest off and on for a couple of years, and it was a show that ran live on the CBC 5:30 on Thursday nights. And so the producer of that show, Stan Jacobson, had come up with an idea for a primetime pop music show. He called me and said, I'm bringing the executive producer from CTV in to see you at a club that you're playing in Toronto. And he brought him in, and they liked the band, and they offered to, at that point, to shoot a pilot, which we did. And from there came a 4-year deal with CTV.
Although the Canadian music scene in the 1960s was still in its infancy, Capitol Records was quick to sign Robbie and the Disciples to a contract.
I put 2 songs on the Hawk label, Fannie Mae and Ain't Love a Funny Thing. And Hawk had no distribution at all. I mean, he had a friend that would take records around in the back of his station wagon and try and get them into record stores. So Capitol approached Hawkins and said, we'll distribute your product. And so it was sort of a natural chain of events after we left Hawkins. Paul White, who was the A&R man at Capitol Records at the time, came to me and said, you know, we'd like to sign the band. And by that time, we were doing television. So they saw it as a very simple way to get promotion on their product because we were on television every week. The unfortunate part about all of it was that they didn't put up any money to record our product. I paid it all.
During my many years in this business, one of the guitar players I worked with was the late Dominic Troiano, one of the legendary guitar players of our time. He still sounds great today whenever you hear him.
Legendary guitar player Dominic Troiano was in Canadian bands The Mandela and Bush before replacing Joe Walsh in the James Gang in 1972. In '74, Dom joined the Guess Who for a few years before launching his solo career. He died of cancer in 2005.
Dominic Troiano was, I guess you could call him the original guitar player in Robbie Lane and the Disciples. There'd been a couple of others prior to that, but by the time the band was recording and sort of getting itself known, he was in the band. We met when we were both 15, and so we were really good friends. And you could see, even in those early days, the creative juices that were flowing in him that weren't flowing in most 15-year-old guys. He taught me a lot. I'd hang out at his house, and we'd write songs together, and he was just such a natural, and you could see that he would not last in a cover band. And that's basically what we were. We were doing some original material, but we were basically doing cover material. And we just knew at some point in the very near future that he wouldn't be able to do that for very much longer. And it was during the time that we were with Hawkins that he finally said, I don't want to play this stuff anymore.
Sit, flip, fly, fly. Don't care if I die. Flip, fly, fly. You don't care if I die. Don't ever leave it. Don't ever say goodbye.
Robbie Lane has played many memorable gigs during his nearly 50-year career, but one in particular stands out.
Maple Leaf Gardens, 1965, opening for 3 British invasion acts. Jerry and the Pacemakers, Billy J. Kramer, and there was a group from the States called the Angels who'd had a couple of hits. And we were just the local guys that had a record that a couple of radio stations were playing, so that the young people in the audience, the majority of them would know our name, but they weren't there to see us. They were there to see the British acts, but it was just an incredible feeling to be part of that whole show, because it didn't matter who came on stage, they were screaming. You know, when the roadies came out to change a mic, they'd scream at them. So it just lifted you so much and made you feel like you were part of something a whole lot bigger than you'd ever been part of before. So that, I guess, really, that's one of my best memories.
Say, but I get the blues, I get me a rocking chair. Yeah, but I get the blues, I get me a rocking chair.
After 4 years on national television, Robbie went back out on the road, then spent many years working for a music management company. In 1982, he reformed the Disciples and continues to perform with the group on a part-time basis. Robbie survived a brain aneurysm several years ago, then sadly lost his daughter to cancer. In the early 2000s, Robbie Lane fulfilled a lifelong dream of becoming a disc jockey. Currently, he hosts a daily radio show in the Toronto area, but performing remains his ultimate passion.
I think I am happiest on stage because that's sort of my territory, and it always has been. And I also feel very fortunate that I can still do this, you know, after all these years. Really lucky, because a lot of guys that, and girls that I knew back in those days that were performers, they don't perform anymore for all kinds of reasons. So I'm really fortunate that I can do this.
Fly, fly. You don't care if I die.